What makes a house a home? It's a subjective concept, one I've been trying to mold into something cohesive for the past few months. To you, it might be giving your house a nickname, or the warmth it provides when sitting by the fireplace. To a lot of suburban moms, it's the addition of a live, laugh, love sign above the doorway. To me, it's the sound of excited paws hitting hardwood floors, and the familiar glow of afternoon sun peeking through the curtains. Whatever adjective you may attribute to your home is up to you, but I truly believe there is no better compliment a house can receive than saying it feels lived in. However, I feel like the house is often taken for granted nowadays, and not praised in the way it deserves. That may be a product of the horrid housing crisis, causing many to lose the roof over their heads, or be forced to move multiple times in a year, never allowing them to settle. This can make a house seem less like a longtime friend, and more like the guy you sat next to in 6th grade math class, who was always asking you for lunch money. It could also be because the gentrification and homogenization of houses has led to the removal of the uniqueness and history so many old houses share. This is a big reason the love for a house seems more tied to the older generation, while the current one might not remember much about their childhood home after they move out. Even with these issues, I think making a house feel like a home, physically and mentally, is a tradition that needs to continue, and still can. Houses are an important part of our life. I mean, they literally fall under one of the basic human needs. Now, maybe you don't have the stories of your grandparents' house built by hand to inspire you to cherish. Maybe you need some examples that will lead you to appreciate your house more. And so we can fall onto our old friend media to help us out. Media finds the best way to make a house feel like a home is to personify it. To attribute some human qualities onto its dusty shelves and spackled ceilings. Let me show you what I mean, starting as I often do with my favorite genre, horror. Horror media has a long history of personifying houses, but often with the ugliest and darkest parts of humanity. If you type movies about a house into Google, 10 times out of 10 you're getting a horror movie. And I'm counting Home Alone as horror. The wet bandits threaten to bite Macaulay Culkin's fingers off, and that furnace in the basement still gives me chills. Haunted houses in films have a long history of making the kids who were unfortunate enough to watch them terrified of their basements, attics, and creaky doors. They just do such a good job at making the house feel alive. Now, obviously this isn't the kind of humanization that will make your house feel homey. But I do think it's a fascinating place to start, to see how writers and directors can inject personality into the place you spend the most time, and really make it feel like something more than a structure. Some of my favorite examples of this are in the absurd 1977 Japanese horror House, where a hungry and vengeful house devours its guests. Mike Flanagan's TV adaptation of the book The Haunting of Hill House, which has one of the most maniacal houses on screen, and it always seems to be watching its inhabitants. And the criminally underrated animated film Monster House, where a hungry and vengeful house devours its guests, sensing a theme here. Unfortunately, for as much as I love the houses in these works, just like nearly all haunted house media, the ones truly driving the terror and experiencing the terror is people, not the houses. The family in Hill House are haunted by the Hill family. The girls in House are haunted by Gorgeous's aunt. And the kids in Monster House are haunted by Constance, who is controlling the house. The house is just a vessel for people to do their haunting, and it sometimes takes on some human characteristics. Which is why the short story Haunted by Sarah Gailey is so excellent. This story is told from the perspective of the house. You get to hear its thoughts and its worries throughout the story. The house is now haunted by the woman who once lived there with her abusive husband, who in a fit of rage murdered her in cold blood. Having the house be the one that feels possessed by the woman gives a whole new meaning to the term haunted house. The house and the ghost are both stuck reliving the painful memories of the husband's mistreatment of the woman, something the house anticipated would happen because he always kept his shoes on inside, showing his uncaring nature right away, because if you can't even show respect to your home, where does that disrespect end? Even though it feels for the woman, the house is also mourning the life it will never have, filled with a loving couple dancing in the kitchen, filled with kids exploring the attic, or finding the crawl space between their bedrooms. The years pass as the house rots, now believing the damage is irreversible, and it is too late for it to ever be loved again. I am irreparable, I am unlovable, I am haunted. This line hit me like a ton of bricks. But as the climax unfolds in its disastrous fashion, and the ghost of the woman burns alongside her trapped ex-husband, the house's spirit escapes. I leave my ashes behind. I let the self that has seen so much pain dissipate with the clearing smoke, and I am not haunted anymore. This is the most powerful story of attempting to live on after domestic abuse I've ever heard, and it's told through the eyes of a house. This is the kind of personification a house deserves, attributing real human experiences onto it, using it not as a stage to tell a story about people, but as its own character to tell a story about humanity. In Ray Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains, the house has a more literal interpretation of personification. By giving the house a lot of technological advances and setting it in the distant future of 2026, well, distant future for Mr. Bradbury at the time, the house is actually more like a well-trained robot here, cooking, cleaning, and serving its owners to the best of its ability. The house continues to announce the days to a family who has been turned to ash by nuclear war, doing its daily chores, even though there is no people to clean up after. The themes of this short story focus more on how nature will always outlive technology, and the house is viewed almost as an uncaring antagonist, sweeping up the remains of the family dog without seemingly having any emotion. But I can't help but feel a heavy sadness for the house, as its foundation burns away, but it continues to try and serve breakfast for a family who is long gone, unable to stop the fire without its inhabitants' help. For as much as a house cares for us, we also are its caretaker, repairing its windows and tiles when needed, because it can only be at its best when we treat it with the best of us. The house is important to me in the story, even if the story itself might not view it that way. And I've actually personified it myself here, by giving it sadness, and then feeling sorry for it. There is one other piece of media that knows how to personify a house and truly make it feel like a home, like no other art I've ever seen. And that art is What Remains of Edith Finch. Personifying the house in What Remains of Edith Finch means showering it in history, specifically familial history, and then having the house share that history with you. Thousands of video games come out on Steam a month nowadays, but the amount of those that spend their time exploring a single house is quite small, and often reserved for horror, just like it is in the other forms of media we discussed. Even among the small few games that do use their time to explore living rooms and kitchens, What Remains of Edith Finch is one of the only ones that does so with such depth and reverence for its location that it becomes something more. Edith Finch, the person whose shoes you fill and movement you control, is not the main character of this story. The Finch family home is. You may be using Edith's eyes to see, but the personality that takes center stage is the one that protects the conclusive stories of each member of this family. The first shot of the house already hits you with so much personality. Shrouded by gloomy trees, you soon come to a clearing, and framed in the distance in all its eccentricity is the Finch house. Edith Finch has lost her entire family tree, rotted by tragedy. She is the last remaining family member, while her and the house. As she continues to approach, you see only foxgloves through the forest, getting more and more prominent as you get closer to the house. Foxgloves, also known as dead man's bells, are incredibly poisonous and often symbolize death. It seems like the house is warning you of what is left beyond its picket fences.
As a child, the house made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't put into words. Now, as a 17-year-old, I knew exactly what those words were. I was afraid of the house.
Edith tells you pretty quickly how she feels visiting her childhood home, coloring our perception of it early on. Edith herself starts to personify the house almost immediately. As you approach the house and its battered windows, Edith says,
"Looking in, I felt like the house itself had been waiting for me."
This is the most on the nose the game gets with acknowledging the house as its own character. and even then it's quite subtle. If you look up, you'll see wood and windows growing out and up towards the sky. As new family members were born, so too were new rooms built and added to the house. The house became a physical family tree for all ancestors of this quirky family. You learn the stories of each of the Finch sons and daughters, mothers and grandfathers, through Edith's narration, and by jumping into each character's memories to play as them right before their untimely death. But the house does quite a remarkable job at filling in who this family was through everything present in its rooms and hallways, complete with its own symbolism and themes. There's nothing quite as intimate as a person's room, and Edith Finch recognizes using it as an opportunity for the house to tell the story of its inhabitants as well. A framed picture of Pike Place Market and the Space Needle lets you know the house is somewhere near Seattle. At first glance, Molly's room shows her love for sea creatures and fantasy, but when your eyes land on an empty gerbil cage, you sense a carelessness regarding life, something she shares with her parents, whose neglect gets Molly killed. Twins Sam and Calvin's room is split down the middle, with Calvin's love for space and Sam's love for the military, showing how they both have a reverence for freedom, but how it differs and what that means to each of them. Barbara's room shows her obsession with her own fame, Edith's her obsession with the family curse, and her efforts to make it real to the media. And Dawn, Gus, and Greg's complete lack of personalization in their shared room shows that army-loving Sam grew up to be a militant father, stripping them of the freedom he once idealized. You learn the history of the Finch family, but realize you are learning the history of the house too. Its conception, by the aptly named Odin Finch, its good times and bad, and even its death and rebirth, as the first house failed to cross the ocean, crashing to the bottom of the sea along with Odin, and washing up near Orca's Island, where, as Edith points out, parts of it were used to construct the new house.
Even the fireplace had a story. Edie told me the bricks came from the original house, after it sank.
At the back of the house lies the Finch family cemetery, filled with the people and animals who have passed on. And protruding out of the shoreline in the distance is the old remnants of the first Finch house, complete with a red light glowing on and off like a heartbeat, letting us know it's still there. This house packs all these creatives and dreamers all under one roof, each family member with enough quirks and mystery to fill a book. Articles written on almost all of them. And what would suit the family that lived to be unique and have their stories be brimming with excitement more than to have a house unlike anything you've ever seen, with articles written on it too. A house that itself is creative and with dreams to be more than a normal house.
And when you look at the house, it had that history of imagination and stubbornness and madness. Any of it seems possible.
Unfortunately, we know the fate of all these creatives and dreamers. Luckily, they have the perfect vessel to share their stories. One day, the house will be buried again, and who will be there to share its story? Just like a person, the house isn't something you can fully understand or appreciate from one encounter. Seeing the depth of one's character and experiences comes with time, and in subsequent playthroughs of What Remains of Edith Finch, you see that depth in all the subtlety you missed on the first walkthrough. You see the foreshadowing of future stories, and you notice the details in its construction, the chaotic yet systematic selection of keepsakes filling the rooms. Walter's room is painted to look like it's underwater, to symbolize Walter himself physically living in a bunker under the house. A fitting book locks away the secrets to the next portion of the house. Walter's bed is a train car, both hinting at his future demise and giving a glimpse into what he loved as a child, turning the train that killed him into a twisted bit of irony. During a flashback, the house seems to shake with fear alongside poor traumatized Walter, who's unaware that the motion is the result of a train passing nearby. A picture of a deer and a swing set sit side by side, denoting how each of the twins died. And during Sam's flashback, you can see those same foxgloves growing near their campsite, and the downed deer. Maybe the house sent them as a warning? Calendars stopped on the day the family members passed hang in many of their rooms. Chairs tossed about by a storm line the trees outside, which you later learn was the storm that caused Gus's demise. and rows of canned fish and half-packed moving boxes tell you of Edith's brother, his job at the cannery, and the mental state of those in the house at the time. You get to know the house as a friend on repeat visits. The fear of the unknown is gone. Only the bittersweet comfort of nostalgia and exceptional storytelling remains. While I may personally disagree with this quote, and believe the unique combination of everyone you've known makes you original, I do like this quote and think it applies to a home as well. The Finch house is the culmination of all its past inhabitants, and every object that once was a part of it, creating a beautiful and human-like identity for the house itself. As someone who grew up in a 100-year-old house that my mom was and still is enchanted by, I got to see my childhood home have a similar rich personality, which was further unraveled over the years thanks to my mom's research. She met with the 90-year-old original owners, who had a family member pass away in the house, discovered old photos and books with writing inked into them, hiding in a hole in our stairway. Found out the house used to be an old fire hall. In fact, the original fire bell still adorns the roof out front. She got to see what the house looked like in its original state, realized how much she had added her own history to the house's ethos, and made it what it is now. As much as that house will always have a piece of my mom forming who it is, so too will my mom always have a piece of that house forming who she is. As much as the Finch home is made up of the family's stories, so too are the Finches made up of the house's stories. And now a small piece of me is made up of the Finch house as well. And the question of who will share the story when it's buried has been answered. I will continue to treasure and pass on its stories to anyone I meet, in hopes they pick up this game and hear the secrets filling the cracks of the wooden walls and feel the warmth of its history all for themselves. As I'm sure thousands of others have done the same, ensuring the Finch family and its house will live on for many years to come. As someone who is moving out of an old, decrepit house I lived in for the last 5 years, and into a nicer, newer, much more expensive apartment at the end of the month, only after replaying this beautiful game have I come to stop blaming the house for all its shortcomings and begin to feel sorry for it. It's not the house's fault the owners used it as a tool to make money, neglecting the worn walls, bruised with spots of mold, ignoring its leaky ceilings as a cry for help. It did the best it could to keep me safe, with what it was given. This house will almost certainly be gone soon after I move out. It's not very often the resident outlives the house, but when they do, they better make sure they carry on the house's legacy. And I finally figured out the best way to make a house a home. Keep a piece of it with you. Share its memories, just as it has shared yours.